So how is it that you would end up being able to write all the code to do this? It would be really, really complicated and ultimately not very feasible to write. And this is where we start bringing machine learning into it. This is a very simple scenario, but you can think about there are many scenarios where it's really difficult to write code to do something, and machine learning may help in that. And I always like to think of machine learning in this way. Think about traditional programming, and in traditional programming, something that has been our bread and butter for many years, all of us here were coders, what it is that we think about expressing rules in a programming language.
And we'll definitely hit the getting started resources in a moment. But because we talk about MNIST a lot and very basic problems in computer vision a lot, I wanted to actually start the talk by sharing a couple of my favorite recent examples, all of which have complete code in TensorFlow 2.0. So even if you're new to TensorFlow, and these concepts can take a long time to learn, like to talk about neural machine translation, you would need to take a class, you can still try the code, and most of them are 50 lines or less, and they run very quickly. So anyway, they're great. Anyway, TensorFlow 2.0 is currently in alpha. It is all about ease of use, which is the #1 thing I care about, and it's ease of use at all levels. So both for novices that are totally starting out, as well as PhD students that want to be able to do their research in a slightly easier way. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. I just wanted to call out the most important thing about TensorFlow is the user and the contributor community. And as of now, we've had over 1,800 people contribute code to the code base, which is huge if you think about how many seats that would fill up here. So thank you very much to everyone who has contributed, and the many more who have done docs and have done teaching and meetups and stuff like that. So it's super cool. Anyway, the alpha of TensorFlow 2 is available today. Also going to fly through this slide, and what you should know is every single example linked from the following slides will automatically install the correct version of TensorFlow at the very top. And they'll all run in Collaboratory, which is the best thing since the microwave. And if you run it in Colab, there's nothing to install on your local machine, so if you want to try out the latest version of TensorFlow 2.0, you literally can follow these links, and with a single click, you'll be in Colab and you're good to go. So before we get into Hello World, I wanted to very quickly talk about things like Deep Dream. So what deep learning is really representation learning. And we don't have as much time as I'd like to go into how convolutional neural networks are so effective at classifying images. And it was discovered that every neuron in every layer of a CNN learns to detect different features when you train it on a large corpus of training data. And you can use TensorFlow to write a loss function to try and maximally excite one of those neurons. So anyway, the TLDR is the fact that we can take an image and super saturate it with dogs is possible as an artifact of training a CNN on a large database of images. Anyway, there's a notebook there where you can try it out, runs very quickly in Colab, and it's like less than 50 lines of code. It's surprisingly short. Once you know the idea, the implementation in TensorFlow 2 is super easy. On the right is an example called style transfer, which I'm going to fly through, but it comes from exactly the same idea. It's given that we've trained an image classifier on a very large amount of data, what else can we do with it? And it exploits a very similar idea as Deep Dream. Another really, really cool example that I wanted to share with you is for something called neural machine translation. And this is like 50 lines of code, give or take, that out of the box will train you an English to Spanish translator. And the only input you need to provide, this is totally open source, we're not hitting the Google Translate API. The reason I like this example, it's all the code you need to implement like a mini version of Google Translate. The simplest possible hello world version of Google Translate can be done in 50 lines. And the one thing I wanted to mention very briefly is I'm a little bit envious of people that are bilingual and trilingual. I have English and barely high school Spanish, and so translation has always interested in me. And the way that the translation example works, it uses something called a sequence-to-sequence model. Briefly, what that does is it takes a sentence in English, or the source language, and it maps it down to a vector, which you can actually see and print out in the code and explore.